Time down for the markets with Leighton, and you say some new hard numbers as far as the health of the catfish industry.
Yes, and a recent shakeup in the hog sector is being seen as bullish for all meats, not just pork, long term. Also ahead in our market segment as we enter the last week of July, some traders worry about perceived weakness in beef demand short term. More sawmills could help Mississippi pine sawtimber prices as export sales of U.S. wheat are described as struggling. We begin at the pond bank where the price of U.S. farm-raised catfish slips south a bit. In new stats reflecting industry activity during the month of June, producers received a pond bank price of $1.13 per pound for premium-size live fish. That is down 13 cents per pound from 1 year ago. Farm sales totaled just over 27.5 million pounds round weight. That reflects an increase of 14% from June 2014. And processor sales were also up in June, topping 13 million pounds. That amounted to an increase of over 2.5%. Kevin Good of Cattle Facts says the pace of cow herd expansion this year is greater than predicted. He says the industry could indeed add over 1 million head of cows to the U.S. herd in 2015. In the meantime, analyst Ted Seifert says the live cattle market is already having to work to keep supply and demand somewhat in balance.
The concern with live cattle recently has been with the Canadians and a similar situation to what we had in 2012. A lot of cattle going to market, a lot of competing beef coming into the country. So we've had our pullback there. From this point forward, I think we can start to stabilize a little bit. Feeder cattle are going to trade a lot in tandem with corn, which we saw that relationship very strong here this week. And we'll see how that progresses going forward.
It was 2 weeks ago here on Farm Week when we first told you about the shakeup in the U.S. hog industry. JBS USA is purchasing all of Cargill's pork operations. This includes 2 processing plants and 5 feed mills. Analyst Dan Huber says the full magnitude of this deal is slipping by a lot of folks, that in his mind it bodes well for all meat production long term, including U.S. beef.
And I think shocked everybody in the industry. And, you know, when you then step back 2 years ago when you had Smithfield purchased, you know, I would say the world as a whole is pretty bullish on meat production, meat demand for the longer term. So I'm long term, I think that is really going to be not only for the livestock sector, but ultimately for the grains. I mean, that could be our next driving force in the years ahead that really kind of buoys the agricultural sector back up.
Time to break for a trivia quiz here on Farm Week. Our topic this week is a reminder about the need for safety in grain bins. Here is the quiz question. How many people died in grain bin entrapments in the U.S. in 2014? Is the answer A, 13, B, 17, C, 24, or D, 31? You'll find out here in a few more minutes. A quick word about timber before we get into some row crops here on Farm Week. Pine stumpage prices are very low, especially in North Mississippi. Extension Professor James Henderson says an increase in the number of sawmills in North Mississippi would improve pine stumpage prices. Right now, North Mississippi prices for pine saw timber are about 8% below the state average.
The northern part of the state in particular is hurting for competition. We lost a number of mills with the recession, and the conditions are getting right now where we might start to see some expansion in terms of existing mills and perhaps even new mills.
Supplies of wheat appear to be more than adequate right now. Extension Ag economist Brian Williams has been monitoring this market. He talked to me earlier this week about wheat. Brian, about a month ago, wheat was having a rally of sorts. The momentum is gone now. What happened between then and now?
Yeah, I guess there's really several things that played into that. Not only was wheat doing real well, but so was corn and soybeans and some of the other crops. And wheat, in a way, was kind of a follower to the other crops. But there were also some other things that were driving it, like the wet weather was keeping some of the producers from getting in the field and harvesting their crop as well.
Well, it looks like the projections are down the road, increase in world ending stocks of wheat. What will that mean for this market?
Yeah, there's really some concerns, and there's a lot of question about the supply. Some places like Canada's spring wheat crop right now, they're in some drought, and so there's concerns about that. Russia, Australia are both having some issues with drought as well, and so there's some concerns, but there's also some rain that's starting to show up to maybe ease some of those concerns and increase the supplies.
So looking big picture here, unless there is really concern with weather or other issues, the pressure's kind of just going to be on for now?
Yeah, there's looking here domestically, we have plenty of stocks out there, so there's really nothing to really boost the prices. They're more following the rest of the crops, and so the other thing to think about is our spring wheat crop seems to look pretty good, and some of the production there could replace some of the winter wheat, reduce production in winter wheat.
As far as competition in the world, is anybody facing some weather crises that could affect this market?
Well, again, I kind of mentioned Canada. They've been having a drought, and Canada is a really big player in the world market. Russia, Germany's been having drought, and so there's concerns in all of those places, but it looks like most of them have been getting a few rains coming in the last few weeks.
And in Mississippi, what are we thinking about 2016? What the crops may look like as far as wheat acreage?
It's hard to tell at this point with the prices where they are. We've seen wheat come up a little bit, so it looks a little bit more attractive, but if we see a bump in corn or soybean prices, that could also cause a reduction in our wheat acres as well.
Back to the trivia quiz now to wrap things up for this week in the markets. The right answer this week is B. 17 people died in grain bin entrapments in this country last year.